Hello and welcome to this part of the Annual Plan 12-13 training materials. In this section I'm going to be dealing with planning expenditure or expenses. There's a separate video on planning revenue, and if you've seen that, a lot of this will be very self-explanatory, but if not, I will go through it all with you. There are 11 different areas of revenue, but there are only 5 different areas of expenditure in which the plan is built up. They are pay, drugs, clinical supplies, non-clinical supplies, and miscellaneous other operating expenses. For the purpose of this, I will work on the drugs sheet. It's similar to all the others except pay. Pay is more complicated because it's linked to the workforce tab, and I will cover that slightly later. Right, so if we look at this, this is very similar to the sheets used to plan revenue. You can see the basic layout at the top and the phasing at the bottom. For the purposes of this, as usual, it's an incremental based budgeting tool, so if you start with a 0, you end up with a 0. So let's go to the statement of comprehensive income and tell it that last year you spent 11 million on drugs. And you'll see before anything else happens, the same figure is carried forward in each year. If we go back to the drugs costs, you'll see that 11 million, there's a set of calculations, and then the next year's is predicted to be 11 million, and that goes on year after year because frankly there are no estimates or changes made in this. So the first opportunity you have is to decide if you had any one-off costs in the year that are not going to recur. Say if there were special circumstances that you had to pay extra amounts, or there were special reasons, then you can just remove that and say that what you're effectively telling us here is the baseline costs for drugs expenditure is actually 10.5 million, but we had some one-off costs in the first year, in the prior year, that have led it to be 11. So the actual figure we should be starting from is 10.5. Then the next thing, you put in a percentage for what you expect drug price inflation to be. Now this percentage is part of your planning process, and you tell us. Just for the purposes of this, I'm going to put in 5. So the next item is a change in drugs expense due to activity changes. Now that's quite a broad brush approach, but if you believe that due to changes in activity you'll be reducing your drugs bill to some degree, you can put that in here. Now I'll just cover that again. Effectively, if you're telling us that there's going to be an activity change, you should give us some idea of what this is. So new prescribing, and some indication of what that means in your strategic plan or financial commentary would be of assistance. And what this is telling us is that a 1.9% decrease in drugs costs is being planned for this in this year, and a 5% increase or a 0.525 million increase in drugs cost is what you're planning to pay based on price inflation. Okay, separately I've dealt with transactions in another video segment and developments. For the purposes of this and to make this a better illustration, I'm going to go and put in a real SIP. That's not an income generation SIP, but an expense savings SIP as related to drug costs, and we'll come back and see how that reflects in here. So if I go to the SIP sheet and I say that we have we're going to change a prescribing system in some way, and that's going to cost us 0.3 million in the first quarter, but we're going to get back 0.2 million in each quarter, and that's the effect of what I'm typing in, because this is a recurrent and this is a non-recurrent one-off cost. So you can see that the net effect is 0.8 million of extra saving, but a 0.3 million cost in the first period, which adds up to a 0.5 million saving in the year. If we go back to the drugs sheet, we can see how that's been reflected, because I put these on the drugs expense lines. They'll feed through, and we're seeing here a recurrent saving of 0.8, a non-recurrent saving of 0.3. Now, since this is a incremental budgeting model, if it's a recurrent saving, then that will flow through immediately from here to the next, etc. But if there's a non-recurrent saving, that represents a cost avoided in this year only that will come back in next year, and therefore the model will see that and will move that cost, reversing the non-recurrent SIPs of the previous year. And whether it's a non-recurrent SIP or a non-recurrent revenue generation cost, that will happen, and it does that automatically for you. So the fact that you've analysed this into recurrent and non-recurrent SIPs is giving you a proper model forward. Okay, if you have a contingency, then obviously you'd want to put that in here. And note that there's no contingency in the first year because this is your actual spend, presumably from your audited accounts. If you don't use a contingency, you may want to back it out as an adjustment for the next year, that your baseline. Let me just illustrate. Okay, so let me just go down. This is an extra cost, so that's negative, and we're taking it out up there, assuming it's unused. That's a bold assumption to make. You may assume some of it's not used, or you may assume it's all used. That's a planning assumption for your trust to make, but I'm just illustrating it here. And similarly, if you have a one-off cost for special drugs, you can put that in here, and then the one-off cost should actually definitely be removed. You wouldn't need to give it a different sign. You could just put it in that line, demonstrating that it's a one-off cost from the previous year which is there. And that illustrates very well the way incremental planning of expenditure is done in the model. And you can see the net effect of all these changes. And if that's a cost, that should of course be negative. Right. And then reversing a cost is positive, and that does work. So this is showing a 0.68% increase in the first year, a significant decrease in the next year, etc. And that would be the effect of the SIP coming through. Right, once you've completed this, then these figures need to feed through to the statement on income for future periods. They do automatically, but you're enabled to phase them in any way you want. Say if you believe the drugs costs are going to be phased towards winter, this calculation will enforce 100% of this amount being transferred. These are the amounts being transferred in each quarter, 2.215, and if you go over here, 2.215 is being transferred in each quarter. If you have a monthly model, then you'll be seeing 12 rows here and 12 columns there. But that's the basis of planning for expenditure in the model. Thank you very much for listening.